In focus today, we're taking a look at Nigeria's rising debt profile. It's been a very huge concern in very recent time, the rate at which the Nigerian government is borrowing. I mean, we've gotten quite a lot of, reports in that. Even in the past few days, we talked about, the electricity loan, and there's been questions as to, borrowing, to pad the budget, to fund the 2025 budget, and questions being asked, where are all these monies going? The looted funds that are repatriated back to the country, where are those funds going? Why can't those funds be used, for the purposes for which, Nigeria is borrowing for? But I'm not the authority in this field. I've got a guest who's joining me via telephone, Mr. Kelechi Godfrey, who's a finance educator, and he's helping us understand the implications of this and more. Thank you for sticking around, Mr. Kelechi. Good to have you join us.
Thank you so much.
All right. So before the break, we're basically talking about, the rate at which and the concerns that have been raised really with how enormous our loans have been and how they're even crippling other sectors like education, like, the cost of living. And I would be tempted to even ask, at what point does it become, a burden, another growth enabler? But I think you already, someone answered that question earlier. So I would like to ask, going forward, when it comes to the issue of revenue going to debt servicing, how does this affect government spending, especially when it comes to critical sectors? You already mentioned like sectors like education. I mean, we have the healthcare, we have infrastructure. What would you say to that regard?
Okay. High debt servicing actually limits government's ability to fund critical sectors. Now, still throwing back more light on the 2025 budget. The 2025 budget is called the restoration budget.
Right.
I don't say it to be restored yet. So back to this now. We're servicing debt with 69%. We're servicing our deficits with 69%. Then our debt servicing actual amount is 16 trillion. Now let's go back to what we have on the priority list. Defense and structure of 4.9 trillion. You're putting 4.9 trillion for a nation that is heavily bedridden with high level of insecurity. And then you ask, why do we still have insecurity when the defense and security sector is underfunded? We're looking at education at 3.5 trillion, and yet you're seeing that, Nigerians are not churning out anything viable or tangible because the kids go to school and, it's more like they are just repeating, we were just recycling the same set of things over and over again. There are no innovations coming up. We had the issue with DeepSeek. DeepSeek came on board and, the innovation really went wild to the point that it was even affecting the US stock market. Now, these are children who were given first-hand on maths, were really taken care of educationally, given things to work with, have the best of teachers, even though that it was just maybe basic education, primary, secondary, but they had the best of hands. Now, the best of hands were not just, they didn't just teach for free, they actually paid. So it means that there was an allocation for those teachers. And now, okay, let's come back to reality. The White House received a memo about stopping funding for HIV drugs, antiviral drugs. Viral drugs can be costing as much as 300,000 every month. Now you're dealing with a high population of people who have a high number of HIV positive patients. If you were to now take up that burden, to take up from where the US stopped, how would you cope with that when your health budget is just 2.4 trillion? So you're saying that for every time the debt servicing amount increases, there is something taken out from prioritized lists, such as health, education, infrastructure, and defense. Something is being chunked out of there to actually take care of the money we've borrowed, to repay the loans we've borrowed. That's why I said earlier, Nigerians are now the one paying for what they did not even get to enjoy. It's just like you bought this service only for you to discover that it's even broken before you started using it. You will not feel happy about it. You want to get your money back, you want to get a refund. But here's the funny thing, Nigeria, we can't get a refund. We can only clamor for good governance. That's what you see on the street. Every once in a while, there's always a protest about good governance, occupy the National Assembly, occupy Aston Road. It's because of things like this that people are actually suffering. And they're trying to speak up. They're trying to let the government know that you guys are making the wrong moves and it's really affecting us. Imagine coming out in a day and you cannot even make enough money to afford a 3 square meal for your family.
Right.
Why? Because cost of living is high. Because cost of drugs are expensive. Because you actually need to pay school fees for your kids in a private school because the public schools are not even doing well. Now, I want to look at my younger brother who is studying medicine. He's been studying medicine for the past 9 years. He has to deal with ASU strike consistently. His mates that are in private schools are done. They're practicing. You're seeing how this thing comes back to haunt us every now and then. So for Nigeria does not even. One major thing is Nigeria does not have a money-making problem. Nigeria actually has a spending problem.
Right.
Our spending priorities are nothing to behold.
And the government right now is arguing that this borrowing is necessary because of Nigeria's low revenue generation. And that has been a very strong reason that the government has put forward when conversations like this happen, that, you know what, we're borrowing because of Nigeria's low revenue generation. Meanwhile, I mean, in 2024, from 2020, between 2024 and now, we've had the finance minister emphasize that, you know, there obviously needs to be a need to double Nigeria's economic growth from, you know, the annualized rates, you know, to pull people out of poverty. But on the flip side, we've had, you know, some reports that share that in 2024, Nigeria's dual tranche Eurobond offer yielded over 10%, which was oversubscribed at $9.1 billion. And we also had that, you know, overall, there was an improvement in the non-oil sector's contribution to revenue in very recent times that obviously were reflecting efforts in that region, in that sector, etc. And if we're marking this significant increase in our revenue generation, because I mean, with relevant sources saying that Nigeria's revenue generation from 2024 till present has shown significant growth, don't you think that, you know, negates what the government is saying to say, oh, you know, we've suffered very low revenue generation in Nigeria, which is why, you know, we're borrowing to the capacity that we're borrowing? In light of that, what alternative strategies do you think that Nigeria could adopt to reduce dependency, this heavy dependency that we have on loans?
Okay, so I want to answer this question, but I want to throw more light on the comments you made. Borrowing is not bad. In particular, government needs to borrow. America holds one of the highest debt structure in the world. China is also, you know, has a high debt cost profile. Borrowing is not actually bad, but the problem here is if you're borrowing to actually solve the problem, get the money from the solved problem and return the money borrowed. That's just how it works. It's just simple logic. If I want to borrow money to get a phone as a content creator, I should be able to make enough money from content creation to pay back for.
Are you there? Okay, I can barely hear you at this point. Can you hear me? Okay, while we try to get our guest back on the line, you can also be a part of the